brand new Scottish Records, exclusive product demos. This is a highly packed hour of family history fun that you will absolutely not want to miss.
Welcome to Fridays Live.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Fridays Live. It's that time of the week we come together and we talk about all things family history because family history is fun and we love it all. It's like our favourite hobby. My name's Ellie, I'm social media manager at Findmypast. It's lovely to have you with us today. Please say where you're joining from in the comments, what the weather's like. We like around the world weather report as well, don't we, here at Fridays Live. Tell me how your week's been, tell me how your research has been going, tell me how the challenge we set you of researching your the women in your family tree. Tell me how that's going as well, because I want updates. Okay, I'm going to be asking you for updates every single week. Last week, or was it the week before? I think it might have been the week before, International Women's Day. We announced that we were going to be trying to get you all to research your women ancestors a little bit more. Not that any of you guys need help with that because you're all amazing, but yeah, just do more, please. Yes, lovely, lots of you joining today. This is lovely, fantastic. I'll just welcome a few of you in the comments here today because we do have a packed agenda, so we do need to get cracking. We've got Gillian joining from sunny Edinburgh. Gillian, you'd have laughed at me earlier, so I was going to put some washing on the line because it was sunny, and then we got the ninja shower and then it just did that. So that was amusing, and I'm really glad I did not put the washing on the line. Andrea joining from sunny Stoke-on-Trent. Kim joining from a cold but bright West Yorkshire. We've got Rosie, we've got Daphne, we've got Georgia, we've got Alan, we've got Sheila. So many of you joining. This is absolutely lovely. Please do say hi to each other as well. If you're brand new here, we absolutely do not bite. We are a lovely, supportive, warm community here. So just introduce yourself. Yeah, as I said, packed agenda today. So we're going to obviously do new records like we normally do. We are going to do a question of the week. And the question of the week is, which of your ancestors' stories most surprised you and why? That's what I want to know this week. You can get your answer in the comments now. But we also have not one, but two special guests this week. And I feel very spoiled, actually. You know, even when I get one guest, it's nice, but to have two in 1 week is brilliant. So we are going to have Emma Maxwell joining us from Scottish Indexes very shortly. And then a little bit later in the hour, we're going to have Lorna, who is one of Findmypast's principal product managers. And I don't believe you guys have met her before. So it's going to be her Fridays Live debut. And you'll all be lovely to her. And it'll be really nice. So yeah, that's what we're going to do this week. Yes, this is question of the week. Which of your ancestors' stories most surprised you and why? So that's the plan. That's what we're going to do today. Packed agenda, lots and lots to get through. And it's not been a quiet week for releases either. We've got lots to talk to you about. I'm going to delve into them a little bit now. And then when Emma joins us in a little while, we'll go into a little bit more detail. So yes, that's what we're going to be doing. New records for this week then. So I'll touch on these very briefly now. So we've got 3 updates for you, 1 new collection and 2 updates. So the first one, they're all for Scotland. Scotland Mental Health Institutions, Registers and Admissions, and these cover 1858 to 1921. There's, I think, about 207,000 plus new records, I think that's about right. And these are from the MC7 General Register of Lunatics from the National Records of Scotland, which is open to the public. Now, if you've joined one of my Fridays Lives before, you will know that I always like to delve into these records a little bit and test them, I guess. Test them, is that the right phrase? So I decided to look for some surnames from my family tree, from my Scottish side, and I had a look for Uitts from Dumfriesshire. And I found 12 results in this collection, including 3 women, because I'm deciding to focus on the women today, because we are going to be talking a little bit about amazing Scottish women from history a little bit later on if we have time. I'm really hoping we have time for this. So we've got Sarah Jane, who was admitted to Crichton, I'm pronouncing that wrong, Royal Asylum on the 4th of January 1907. We've got Margaret, who was admitted in 1860, and Agnes, who was admitted in 1875. And I think, from a quick glance at other records, that Agnes might have had 3 children and then she was admitted shortly afterwards. I think I'd need to go back and double check. Next, we've got some additions into our Scotland Court and Criminal database, and these cover 1619 to 1940. And I think we've got a good chunky just over 1 million records, which is very impressive, very exciting. And I found 36 Uitts in Dumfriesshire in these records, including an Elizabeth Uitt who was born around 1857 or 1858. And then between 1873 and 1882, she appears something like 15 times. Her first entry was she was just 16 years old, and it told me that she was a mill worker. I did find her on the 1881 census. She was listed as a mill worker, but she was also listed as out of work, as was so she was lodging in another mill worker's household, and that head of the household was also out of work. But she later became a prostitute, and she appears in these records up until around 1882. And I also found some really fascinating corresponding newspaper articles about her. One from 1879, when she is mentioned for theft, prostitution, and also sort of drunk and disorderly. Around the same time, she was fined for, this is the quote from the newspaper article, annoying and inopportuning passengers. I think that was the phrase that was used. And then later in 1879, I think in the October of that year, she was actually assaulted by a mason called Joseph Kirk. But luckily, she was rescued by 2 passing police officers. They'd heard her screaming. Really, really chilling read, that one. But it helped build that bigger picture of this woman who I just went into these new records to research. And I always get I must find out more about this person. So that is exactly what I try to do. I try to look in newspapers. And then the last one we've got is the Scotland Paula on Poor lists, and these cover 1845 to 1930. They're just shy of 8,000 new records, and I found a Mary Cochran Uitt in these records in 1870. And these were quite detailed, actually. They gave me her age, her birth year, her address, and a name of the spouse or parent. So it didn't tell me which, but it did tell me the name, which was George Uitt. And then I went in and had a look in the censuses, and I think she was an unmarried servant, I believe, who I think spent some time in Lancashire working. Apologies if you can hear the flat above, by the way. They have got their tumble dryer on. I'm really sorry if you can hear that. Anywho, a quick look at newspapers before we welcome in our first guest. So it's another bumper week for newspapers this week. Very, very impressive. Rose is in the comments today. She works so hard on all of this. Like I don't think you understand how amazing my colleague Rose is. I love her to pieces. Bringing you all incredible newspaper content week after week. Just shy of 300,000 new pages this week. There are 5 new titles and 17 updated titles. And perhaps the most interesting new title of the week is a title called Prisoners of War News. And this is a World War II title. And the general idea was to name British prisoners of war during the Second World War, in addition to other things as well. I believe it was published in Aberdeen, so there is a slight Scottish slant to the people who are listed, but it doesn't mean you're not going to find people who weren't Scottish in there as well. So given the fact that World War II records are sometimes a little bit more difficult to come by, given that the MOD still holds a lot of them, for example. So a title like this could be really useful if you are researching the Second World War or a Second World War ancestor. So yes, that is my spiel of the new records. It's a little bit of a whistle-stop tour, but we're going to dig into them a little bit more now. So I'm going to ask if my special guest is ready with a thumbs up. She is lovely. Okay. I would like you all to meet the very, very wonderful Emma Maxwell.
Hello, thank you for inviting me on.
Thank you for agreeing to come on. I'm absolutely delighted to have you. I'm sure the community watching will be keen to pick your brains. Let's delve into some questions then. So if anybody watching is not familiar with you and your work and the work of Scottish,
so it's just one thing to say. It's just myself and my husband Graham, and so we're genealogists. We've been both genealogists for over 20 years now. But what we noticed was that most people want to do their own family history. They might need the services of a genealogist sometimes, but the fun is in doing it yourself. So we started indexing records that were inaccessible to most people. So the National Records of Scotland particularly is full of just the most amazing records, and we wanted to make these more accessible. And we have been joined by an amazing team of volunteers, and they help us to index these records. So that's why our indexes are available for free to view online. And then we offer services. So we offer those services to people who can't go and look at the records themselves. And that's how we work. So we've just loved it, being able to help people access original documents.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing. Like I was familiar with your website and the work you guys do, but I don't think I quite appreciated until just this week the sheer scale of the effort that just you and Graham put in. It's amazing, and making it so much easier for anybody with Scottish ancestry to research that from wherever they are in the world. It's wonderful, and I think you're absolutely right. For many people, employing a genealogist is great, but half the fun is the detective work that you do yourself. Like, it's so entertaining.
Yeah, it is. Well, that's why I like helping people, because you get a puzzle, and we love that. You get a puzzle, you're like, oh, can I solve this for them? And it's just great fun.
Absolutely. If anybody does have any questions for Emma about the work that she does or about Scottish indexes, please add it into the comments. We'll try and get to a few. So we talked a little bit about Scottish indexes then. So if somebody comes to the website for the first time, what can they use it for? Where would you advise they start? That sort of thing.
Yeah, well, often it's for problem solving, because you need the basic records. Obviously, if you're looking for census records, Findmypast has got the whole of Scotland. We don't have that. So you need to build your basic structure. And what we've got are records that will help you solve some mysteries and help you to add a little bit more detail as well. So, for example, the prison registers, always exciting when you find somebody in a prison register. You just get maybe a little bit more of their character and what they were up to. But also a collection that you guys have already had on your website for a few years now are our paternity indexes, and they're really helpful. So if you've got an illegitimate ancestor and you don't know who the father was, these are mainly sheriff court records which will answer that for you. So there's a lot to do with problem solving, and we'll go on to talk about the court of session records that have been added as well. And again, the amazing detail in these records that can link families together. So when you have that problem, which happens quite a lot in Scottish records, you've got a parish register somewhere before 1855, but you can't connect these families together. These are the linking documents that can help you to solve those problems.
Yeah, because for most people, your ancestor will appear on, for example, a baptism, maybe a marriage, and their burial record. They would hopefully appear on the censuses, pinpoints in time every 10 years. But it's like, well, what about the rest of it? What about the rest of their lives? Like, where is the meat? Where's the color? Where's the context? And this is what I really like about the work that you guys do and the records that you offer. It's that additional color that really brings that person's story to life, and in quite unexpected ways. And sometimes, like you say about the paternity records, and in particular the records that have come onto Findmypast this week. Is there anything that you can tell us about the records from this week?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in them. They're amazing, and it's wonderful to work with them. You mentioned the mental health records, and I think that for a lot of us, the first time you see the words like lunatic, words like asylum, you're kind of taken aback that this was said about somebody, especially if it's a member of your family. And these records, what you see in them are doctors' accounts of what they observed and what was reported to them. Now, most of us are not going to be medical experts, so we couldn't make a diagnosis on that, but it does help us to see the background, to see what our ancestors were going through, and maybe why family made that hard decision for them to go into an asylum. And the reality is there wasn't a lot of treatment options. So one of these more recent batch that we've been doing includes a lot of soldiers from World War I. And again, I'm not a medical expert, but you look at it and you think this looks like PTSD. That's maybe how it would be described today. So to get the full story, rather than just that we see that that's where they died, I always feel that's really important. And one of the things we've discovered is, before I started doing this, I had in my head that somebody was put in an asylum and that was it. They were sort of locked up and the key was thrown away. But that's not the case. Actually, a lot of people were released. They were maybe treated and they were able to go back home with their family. So that's actually been quite reassuring to learn. What else is the criminal? I mean, anything legal is always fantastic when you're tracing your family history, because you get, one of the things you get in Scotland is a particularly detailed designation, because we all have that problem of trying to work out which John Smith is our John Smith, or have we mixed up the cousins? This is a problem. But when somebody appears in a legal record, even if they're just a witness, you get all sorts of information. You get their residence usually, you might get an age, you might get their occupation, you get information to pinpoint. And sometimes, particularly if they're still living at home with their parents, you get the names of their fathers, and that's just an added bonus when that happens. But in general, so the Court of Session was Scotland's highest civil court. So it's the same as it is today. It's the same court that's still going. Obviously, we only work with the older records. And these, they cover so many different types of cases. Anytime your ancestor appears in them, it's always worth looking at the full record. It could be a non-payment of debt. So let's say your ancestor was a blacksmith, somebody didn't pay their bill. He may have ended up taking them to court to force them to pay that. But you also get other ones like you could have a tutor appointed for children. So this wasn't like to teach them geography or something. This was to care for them. So if they were an orphan, if their father had died, they would be appointed, but these would be the closest female relative and the closest male relative. So you're getting all of that information, how all these people fit together, which is just absolutely amazing. And then they're full of detail, and it's these extra bits that we need to bring the colour to our family tree, but also to put that jigsaw together.
Yeah, and we're holding the transcripts on Findmypast. So if somebody comes across one of these transcripts when they're searching and they'd like more information, how can they go about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends which record it is. So on your website, on ours, we've got the full NRS reference. That's the National Records of Scotland. I would say if you are able to go to, I saw there's some people from Edinburgh joining. If you can go and look at it yourself, because that's the best thing to do. It's the most fun thing to do. You can also click through from your website to our website, Scottish Indexes, and use one of our services, and we'll provide a copy of that record. Another thing is use the newspapers. If you see somebody's been in prison, go to the newspaper and see if you can find out a little bit more about it. So all these things all join up together.
Yeah, I just love newspapers. It's almost like Rose is sitting here right now, because if Rose was doing this, she'd also be exalting newspapers. Going back to the mental health records for just a moment, I completely agree with what you said about the first time you come across your ancestor in those kind of records, it's quite a sobering moment. And that is exactly what I did when I found Elizabeth Uitt. No, not Elizabeth Uitt. It was the other ones like Agnes and etc. But because all of those three women were at the same asylum, I decided to go and find out a little bit more about that asylum, because obviously my curiosity was piqued. Because you do sort of imagine, as you say, they go in and they lock them up and lock away the key, throw away the key, etc. But upon researching this one asylum, I found that it was one of the first sort of asylums in Scotland to use things like art therapy and music therapy, and that made me feel a little bit better. And you're absolutely right. They don't just, the majority of people wouldn't just be in there for the rest of their lives. They would get treatment, and they'd get better, and they'd be able to go home.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that was the Crichton, I think it was at Dumfries, and that was a particularly good asylum. They did vary, but yeah, you can go on to find out more. And of course, we've indexed the general admissions for some, and on our website, you can click through to learn a bit more about each asylum. And we'll also link to the archive that sometimes they might have case papers as well, like patient records, which you can, not all cases will have those, but you can sometimes find them and get even more about how they were treated and how they responded.
Yeah, it's a absolutely fascinating topic, actually. And it was only just this afternoon I was speaking to Jen, my colleague, and we were also speaking about PTSD in soldiers after the First World War. So it's quite topical that you mentioned that as well. Yeah, utterly fascinating. So I encourage anybody, even if you don't have any Scottish roots, go and explore these records. They are fantastic. Even if you just want to sharpen your research skills and try something new for the afternoon or for a little bit of time over the weekend. Do you mind if I ask if you have any specific tips on Scottish family history more broadly? Is there anything that you might be able to share with our lovely community?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things is, I mean, there's loads of tips, but one of them is to utilise the maiden surname. So in Scotland, it is used throughout a woman's life. You don't have to use your husband's surname, and historically, women didn't. It's actually quite a modern thing that people started using their husband's surname. Sorry if you can hear that dog. That's the neighbour's dog. I don't know if you can hear that. So what you can do is in records, quite often, it's like you'll have Margaret Scott or Smith. So Scott would be her maiden surname, and Smith would be her married surname. And that is just a really useful resource. So you'll see that in the prison registers that have been added, and you'll also see that in the mental health records. And in all legal records, married women are usually recorded with both surnames. But beyond that, use it when you're trying to find a death record. Use it when you're trying to find a baptism record. So a thing I like to do quite often on Findmypast is get a whole picture of a family. So I use your baptisms, and rather than looking for a specific child's name, I put in the surname and I put in the mother's maiden name, and you get a whole list. Now you then have to work out, is this definitely all the same family? But you can usually do that. And that maiden surname being on so many records is probably one of the biggest, the most common thing I use to solve problems. People come with a problem and I head over to whichever website and I put the maiden surname in and the right entry pops out. Now, of course, not all records do contain the maiden surname, so it is important to also search without the maiden surname, but so many do that is often one of the best tips that I would give. Other than that, I think just you certainly with spellings of surnames, they vary a lot. We all know that. Make sure you're using wildcards and keep an open mind. Sometimes, and more particularly maybe we're at a family history fair, somebody will say, "Oh, I don't have any criminal ancestors." Well, how do we know if we don't? If they weren't in prison when the census was taken? How are we going to know? We don't know. And it's the same even with, you might think, so within the Court of Session also includes divorce cases and separation cases. Now, divorce was a lot more common in Scotland than England because the law was different, but also separation, a legal separation, which you see in the Court of Session, was used sort of before a divorce or when there was no grounds for divorce. So, for example, cruelty. You couldn't, I think it was the 1930s before you could be divorced for cruelty, but you could get a judicial separation. So you might not think your ancestors got a divorce, and they maybe didn't, but just keep an open mind, search the records anyway, and see what you find.
I think that's a great tip. Keeping an open mind. I think that's a valid piece of advice for any facet of family history research, because as you very rightly just said, you could go, "Oh, none of my ancestors were criminals and none of them were in prison." Like you unless you look, you don't know.
You don't know. Yeah.
Don't assume. Just don't assume it. I found one of my Uitt relatives was a prostitute this morning. So and I never knew that before this morning. So
yeah.
that's all good. I sort of want to go research her a little bit more now, which I probably will do this weekend. Fantastic. Do you mind if we take a quick question?
Yeah.
If you do have any questions for Emma, now is the time to get them in, because I've only got her for another 5 minutes or so. But this is from Rosie. Would you know why a soldier from Scotland and his wife might be in Norfolk in 1816? He was still in the military as far as is known.
Yeah, well, I would imagine just on military service, being trained, or I think if any ancestor was in the military, do expect them to move around a lot. They would have made, we often talk about fans, don't we? Their family and their acquaintances. So once somebody was in the military, which was quite common in that time period, they would have met all sorts of different people and ended up specifically in Norfolk. Military history is not one of my stronger points, because a lot of the records are at Kew rather than the National Records of Scotland, so it's not something I've used as much. But what to do is to find out which regiment they were in and where that regiment was, and that might point in the right direction. But I can't answer specifically why it would be Norfolk in that period.
I think that's great advice, though. And a lovely comment from Daphne here. The Maxwell Scottish Indexes conferences are epic. We can quote you on that, Daphne. Epic. I think that's a lovely compliment. And lots of people adding in thoughts on their Scottish ancestors here as well. Is there, before we wrap up, is there anything coming up with Scottish indexes in the near future, like any events and things like that, that people can get involved in?
Yeah, so we do have our conference tomorrow, and it is free and it is on all day, and we try to make it time zone friendly. So you just go to our website and there's a banner on the homepage, and you can register on Zoom or you can watch the live stream. And tomorrow we've got a variety of topics. We're going to have the archivist Irene O'Brien from Glasgow City Archives. We're going to be looking at inheritance in Scotland, and we have a particularly fascinating presentation from Dr. Hoole, who's done a lot of research into prostitutes in Aberdeen and why prostitution was such a problem. So again, one of those things, you come across it in your family and you're sort of a bit taken aback, that helps to put it in context. So that is on tomorrow, and then our next conference will be in September.
Fantastic. Rose has put a link to the Scottish Indexes website into the comments. So guys, if you scroll back up a little bit, you should be able to find it. Really, really exciting. Yeah, fantastic. Any more questions before we finish up, guys? Now is the time to get them into the comment section. But Emma, is there anything else that you'd like to share? For example, any other news that you've got that you can share?
One thing I would say is watch this space. A lot of people think that Scotland is very difficult to do research, and I think it's just because we've not got enough online yet.
Interesting.
So, that's a nice tease to end on. I think on our website, if you look at some of the learning zones, you'll see some of the resources that are not online yet. And if they were all online, I think we'd all be making a lot more progress with our family history.
Excellent. Oh, I'm so intrigued now. I'm going to be watching this. Watching this with great interest.
And we also have more. We actually have a lot more prison records that come on that are waiting to be proofread. So we have a lot of volunteers who index, and then that needs to get proofread. And we do have a bit of a backlog at the moment. So we should be getting some more of those on in the next few months.
Oh, lovely. So excited. And Barbara says she's looking forward to seeing you tomorrow to the conference. And to anybody else going tomorrow, enjoy yourselves, take lots of notes, come away with a lovely open mind, and yeah, very exciting. It has been absolutely delightful having you as a guest to it. Will you come back on again? I could feel like I could just watch you for hours.
Definitely, I'll come back anytime.
Excellent, thank you so much. I'm almost envisaging like a whole hour session, but I'll put my brain to work and we'll talk. Lovely, thank you so much. I'll let you go and enjoy your weekend, and we'll talk soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. See you.
Bye. Oh, you guys, how amazing is Emma Maxwell? I'm sort of in awe a little bit. Fantastic. Okay, so we've got a little bit of time now before our next guest comes on, and what we're going to do some questions of the week, and then I want to just talk very briefly about some epic women from Scottish history. that I love. And I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it's more like I'll talk about them. And then if you want to go and look them up, you can. I don't know why you wouldn't. They're amazing. So let's do some questions of the week. So I'm going to scroll right back up to the top. Question of the week is, in case you missed it, which of your ancestor stories most surprised you and why? So that's the question of the week. And now let's have a gander in here. I think mine one probably would have been the prostitute I found today. That was quite surprising. And I want to go and research her a little bit more. I don't think she's a direct ancestor. I think she's a relation. I also found last week or the week before when we did release the Women's Land Army records, I found 2 of my grandfather's cousins in there, which is just lovely. Like there's hardly any records on these 2 women, and there they are, plain as day, in the Women's Land Army records. And that was just wonderful for me. Okay, let's have a flick through here. So Ruth says, Ruth Macintosh was involved in a church riot near Inverness in 1823. They did not like the new clergyman chosen, who was tried at Edinburgh. This is the last record I have of him. Goodness, a church riot because they didn't like the new clergyman. Amazing. Robin says, I found out my grandfather's uncle, Henry Lacey Smith, was a Spitfire pilot. His body was discovered in France in 2012. Gosh. So he must have been shot down in France then, and nobody knew exactly where. And oh my goodness. But wonderful that he's been found, even if it's, many decades later. That is surprising. Yes, Ari, dodgy sound. I know I had problems with my headphones last time, so if there are any headphone issues, you guys need to tell me if I sound like I'm crackling, and I will take headphones out because they are at the moment behaving. Touch wood. Andrew said, I found my dad's uncle, who he'd never heard about, died in France 10 years before my dad was born. We're almost certainly the first family members to visit his grave. Does that mean that he doesn't have any direct descendants, Andrew? If so, that's really sad, but lovely that you and the rest of your family have been able to go and pay tribute to him. That's really lovely. And do you know what? That's particularly remembrance, but also like other ancestors as well and relatives who don't have like direct descendants to remember them. It's on the rest of us to remember them. I think that's super important. Janet says, my late father's cousin was killed in a Zeppelin raid in 1915 in London. Started with very vague and partly correct details. Fascinating research. I can imagine. There was something else I can't remember the exact context of this, and it was only earlier this week, and it just proves how shocking my short-term memory is. But I was researching something similar about Zeppelin raids in London in the First World War this week, because we often don't think of bombing raids in the First World War. We sometimes, we tend to think Second World War, and yeah. Anyway, that's by the way. Julian says, I found a few female ancestors who were handloom weavers. Most of them were men. Reading up on them is fascinating, on what their lives were like, and women during wartime who kept the home fires burning and how they managed to keep families together while the men were at war. It's exactly like it comes back to things like the Women's Land Army records that we were looking at, and examples in newspapers. It's about finding those sadly tiny little tidbits that will tell this story for you, because unless you've got diary evidence or oral history that's been passed down, that could get lost. So even just coming across things like this, Gillian, is just wonderful. Okay, fantastic. Keep those coming in. Just before we welcome our second guest for today, because I can see she's just joined, so she's ready and waiting. But I just briefly wanted to talk about some cool Scottish women from history, because it's International Women's History Month all throughout March, and we're also running our Her Story campaign at the moment. And the general idea with that is that there are something like 39 million fewer women than men in family trees, and something like some staggering statistic like 71% of unknowns in family trees are women. So that means that there's a huge gap in what we know about our male ancestors in comparison with our women ancestors. So again, it's on all of us to collectively make sure that these women are remembered and we tell their stories. And just in the spirit of that, I wanted to very, very briefly talk about some cool women who I champion from Scotland, because we're doing Scottish because the records this week were Scottish. But yeah. So the first lot I want to talk to you about are the Edinburgh Seven, and I'm sure many of you have heard of them. So these were 7 women, and they were the first women to matriculate to any British university. They studied medicine, and when the time came for them to be awarded their degrees, that wasn't possible because that wasn't a thing at the time. Okay, so women could go to university, but then they couldn't actually get the degrees. They couldn't graduate. So they campaigned to be able to go to university, but they also campaigned to be able to have their degrees at the end of it. Utterly fascinating. There's 7 of them to explore, and I believe it was Edinburgh University they attended. Definitely go check that out. Next up, we've got Flora McDonald, another fascinating figure. We've actually got a blog post on her, and I've forgotten to give the link to Rose to put in the chat, but I'll dig it out later. So Flora McDonald helped Bonnie Prince Charlie escape after the Battle of Culloden in 1746. Utterly fascinating figure. Again, just worthy of, even if you just go and have a scroll through her Wikipedia page, even that's fascinating. Then you've got scientist Mary Somerville, and she was the first person in print to be described as a scientist, which is quite cool. And she and another female scientist, Caroline Herschel, they were the first women to be elected as honorary members of the Royal Astronomical Society. That's a really hard word to say. Astronomical Society. There we go. Got it that time. And she also helped in the discovery of the planet Neptune. So really, really epic woman there. And I can't talk about women from history without talking about some suffragists and suffragettes. So you've got Mary Burton, who was a suffragist and social reformer, and she was a really strong advocate for women's rights, for improving the education of women, but also working people as well. So leveling the playing field, basically, for people who might not have had as easy access to education. And then finally, there are so many other women I could talk about, but I'm running short of time drastically. Elsie Englas, who is a doctor, a surgeon, and a suffragist. And during the First World War, she actually wanted to go and enlist, and she was told, no, you can't enlist. And so she ended up setting up the Scottish Women Hospitals for Foreign Service, because she was a doctor and a surgeon. And she was actually involved in establishing 14 hospitals across Europe during the First World War. She was so desperate to do her bit, and she was a doctor. She wanted to help people, and that's exactly what she did. Now, excuse me, I need a sip of water. And I'm hoping my second guest is ready. Can we have some thumbs up? Yeah, we've got a nod and a thumb up. Lovely. Okay. For our second guest, I'm really delighted to welcome in her Fridays Live debut, Lorna, who is Principal Product Manager at Findmypast. Hi, Lorna.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
I'm very well. How is everyone?
Yeah, I think we're all good here. We're talking about Scottish family history. We're talking about women. We're talking about surprising ancestors' stories. Yeah, it's all good in the hood here. I'm never saying that again on Fridays Live. So
Good.
I'm going to put a little jar for myself. If I say that again, I've got to put a pound in the jar. Lovely. Thank you so much for coming on today. Obviously, this is your first time on Fridays Live. And do you want to just let our community know a little bit about yourself, what you do at Findmypast, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I'm a Principal Product Manager at Findmypast. I think you had my colleague Martin here last month. Yeah, so we do the same job. I've been at Findmypast for about 2.5 years now, which has flown by. That's gone in a blink of an eye. But I started researching my family tree. I checked the dates actually, and it's been 12 years. I don't know where that time's gone. So yeah, I've been doing it for a while, and I saw this job come up as a product manager at FMP, and I thought that is just my dream job. I'll apply for it. I'll never get it. and here I am with my dream job. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and obviously none of you guys watching will know this, but Lorna is, I mean, you'll know in a second, but Lorna is brilliant, innovative, creative, a wonderful colleague. I'm getting teary just thinking about it.
Well, I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah, I have nothing but the utmost respect for you and what you do, and just the fact that you have been doing like your family history for like the past 12 years as well. You're one of us.
I am, most definitely.
Have you come across anything in particular in your family tree? Anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, well, I suppose it was my nan that actually got me into family history. And you know, when you go, like, you indulge your nan, because I loved her to bits, and like she'd tell me all these stories, and I went from like just listening politely to like getting really more interested as time went on. And it was me going, "Can we get the photo album out? And can you explain who's who?" So it grew out of that. And then when sadly my nan passed away, she was 100, so I was very lucky to have her in my life for so long. But some of the things that she'd sort of spoken to me about, I thought, well, I'll carry on with that. And I had my few props here, my great granddad, and I'd got all his war medals. So looking into him and his dog Tag as well, which is a really beautiful thing to have. Oh, it's this side, isn't it? This side. So I did all the research on him and in the war. And then I found out my great grandfather ran a mineral water company in Hensford. So I started collecting the bottles with the mineral water name on. So yeah, I love it. And I love just the interesting directions it sort of takes you off on, really. Most of my family are either coal miners or farmers in Staffordshire on one side of the family, and then I've got lots of weavers from sort of Skipton, and goes back to sort of Quakers, early Quakers around Pendle. And the most exciting thing is, I think, and I'm still researching this, I'm about 80-90% sure that I'm descended from a Pendle witch, which initially horrified me. I don't know what I thought a witch was, a pointy hat on a broom, but the more I've read up on it, the more I'm just enraged on their behalf and delighted to be descended from one. And I'd be upset now if I prove that I'm not. So I'm just obsessed slightly with Pendle witches at the moment. So if there's anybody with a Pendle witch relation, do shout.
Why is this the first time I'm hearing about this, by the way?
I think it's one of those things that I'm just worried now that I'll find that I've taken a wrong turn somewhere and it'll get taken away. So I'm keen to just keep checking all the facts and make sure that's correct. But very excited about that.
Yeah, but this is what I love about what you do at Findmypast, is that you've come into this product role with this already having a background in family history, and that it comes across in the things you work on and the things you implement. And we're going to talk a little bit about those today, aren't we? So do you want me to, I've got some slides. Do you want me to share those now?
Yeah, do you want to share those? Yes, if that's okay. Yeah.
Lorna has kindly prepared some slides for you all. And just let me know when to move over. So we've got some changes, and I'll pass over to you again.
Yeah, so you can move on to the next one, please, Ellie. Yeah, lovely. So just wanted to talk to you about some changes we're making to the home page. And I'm always conscious that I always worry, I suppose, that people think as product managers and engineering teams that we sit around thinking, which bit of the site shall we muck up today? Like what should we twiddle with in an unnecessary manner? And trust me, we definitely don't. We're always thinking, how can we add more value? How can we make things easier to find? How can we help new people get onboarded with the hobby, because it's quite a difficult hobby. I remember when I first started, there's loads of things I wish I'd known. So how can we make those things simpler for people? So one of the things that I've been working on is the homepage. So there might be some of you on the call today who are like, I recognize that version, and there may be some of you who recognize the version on the right, and that will depend on when you joined Findmypast, when you first registered with us. So if you registered mid-December, you'll see the view on the left. That's the one I see when I go on site. If you're a slightly newer user, you might recognize the one on the right-hand side of the screen. So just to let you know, you might be like, oh, that's not the one I recognize. if you are an older member, an existing member like myself, over time we will transition you to the version on the right. So I just want to kind of give you a bit of background really about why we're making that change for you. So if you could move on to the next slide, Ellie, that'd be lovely.
Yeah, particularly because we've got Daphne and Matthew saying, does it need changing? Well, we're going to tell you why just now. Here we go.
So we always start with the why. Like I said, we genuinely don't just make changes for the sake of it. It's not like who can think of a change today. We only ever change things for good reason. So just a couple of the reasons really: to provide better support for new people joining Findmypast, because like I said, it can be quite a difficult hobby to get going with, and you sometimes need a few pointers about what's the right thing to do. And I think if you land people on the site with not too much context about where to start, it can be a tricky hobby to get going with. So the other reason was to give a bit more differentiation. So we have lots of members that come to the site to search our records, and we have lots of members that also create trees. But they're quite two distinct camps, and we hope everybody goes on to build a tree, but lots of people just come and search our records. So we wanted to try and differentiate that homepage experience based on what we can see that you're doing on the site. So that was another reason. We also wanted to try and build in a bit more personalization. So the current website, those tiles tend to be a little bit static. If you've been with us a few years, you might be like, well, they don't change very often. We've made them look a bit different occasionally, but actually the content has remained fairly static. So we wanted to add a bit more personalization into that. And we also want the homepage really isn't designed to get in your way. It's designed to help you get to where you want to go to quickly. But I'm also conscious that sometimes when you're in the weeds of the site and you go down rabbit holes, which we all do when we're researching, sometimes you're like, how do I get back to where I was at the start? Or you just need to reset. So we want to keep that homepage as a really safe space to return back to. Another thing we wanted to try and do was give you kind of suggestions for next best actions. Now, some of you will come on site and you'll have a very specific research goal and you'll know what you're doing, and that's fine. You can absolutely ignore all of that. But for people like me who on a Sunday afternoon perhaps have an hour while the roast is cooking, and I sit down on my computer and I'm like, well, what should I do? Who should I do today? What should I do today? We're just going to provide some suggestions for next best actions based on what we can see you've done before, perhaps new hints that we think you should follow. So we're trying to give a bit of structure for those who perhaps need just a bit of a prompt on where to go next. And finally, the final thing we wanted to do was have a bit more of a dedicated area to showcase either new features that we release, new records we release, new offers that we think are important to you. And if we just kind of encourage people to bookmark their favourite page and go straight to it or whatever, then they miss out all of that rich context and perhaps aren't getting the best from their subscription with Findmypast. So that was the kind of final reason we wanted to make these changes.
Brilliant.
So if you move on to the next slide, Ellie.
There we go.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk you through the discovery phase. So when we've decided that there's a really compelling why, this is kind of the next phase we move into. So we come at it from all possible angles. So we read and listen to all the lovely feedback we get from you. So that's either customer support feedback, it's feedback on the forums, we read all of that. We watch sessions sometimes in the background to watch how people are using the site. It's all anonymous, so we can't see any personal data, but we can see how people are moving around the site. We looked at every aspect of the current page, so we analysed who clicked what, when they clicked it, and how often they clicked that particular feature. We analysed how much search activity came from the search form on the page, because it takes up quite a lot of the page on the current design. We looked at the quick links and we looked at which ones people actually use and click on. And then we had to think about, well, what else could we get into the page? And also from a tech perspective, we investigated how we could structure the page so it would work better across a range of different experiences, so on desktop and also on mobile devices, so that you were getting a good experience across the two. And then we explored in the background what new data we've got in terms of what we can see you're doing on site that would help us personalize that page for you even more. So that's everything that got kind of thrown into the melting pot. And if you move on to the next slide, Ellie, if that's okay. This is sort of what the new page looks like. Now, it's not possible for me to tell you what your page will look like because they will all be different. It will be personalized to what you as a member of Findmypast do on site, whether you're a tree user, whether you're a search user, whether you're new, whether you've been with us for years. So all I can really explain is the structure of the new page, and we've tried to structure it into 3 easy to use sections, and you will all see these 3 sections. So the first one is this what's next column that I talked about, and we're adding to this section all the time, but for the moment it's got things like start your tree if you're a new user, find yourself in the records. That's normally the first thing people like to do, so we signpost people to make that easy. We get people into birth, marriage and death searches just to get them kind of onboarded with the hobby. And then once we can see that you're beginning to grow your tree, we can signpost you to fill gaps in that tree and surface related records, hints to you, new top hints that we think are going to be really useful in terms of your tree building, tree search results, and there's more to come. We've added a new tile just today, a suggested mother hint into that feed as well. And then the second section is that one at the top right. That's going to be shortcuts. So that should hopefully be the easy way for you to get to the places you go to most on the site, or we think you should go to most to on the site to help your research. And then the third area is that spotlight area where we'll showcase new product features, releases, offers that we think are personal to you. So we won't be pushing things that we don't think fit your profile. We'll try and tailor that to things that we think you will need. So over time, we will begin to move our existing users over to this new design. There's just one more thing I want us to do, either before we start that or very quickly afterwards, which is give you the option to dismiss or skip some of these what's next tiles. So if you get one and you're like, well, you've given me a hint for, I don't know, Fred blogs, but I'm not actually interested in Fred blogs, you can skip that tile and then we can push up something kind of more relevant to you. And we'll learn from the things that you skip or dismiss as well. So this is really just one to watch out for. Hopefully I haven't taken anything away that you really loved on the old design, but feel free to tell me if I have, and keep feeding back. If there's more things you'd like to see there that aren't there, please do let us know.
Fantastic. I can tell so much thought has gone into this, and so much data has been analysed, so much feedback has been analysed. But as Lorna just said, you know, if something will if it changes for you and something has disappeared, and you're like, no, I really do need this, tell us. Drop us an email to customer support. You can contact us on social media as well, and just say, you know, I've got this bit of feedback about the new web home, the new logged in homepage, and this is my feedback. It goes to Lorna. It all gets tagged, it all gets logged, and it all goes to Lorna's team. So yeah, that's the plan. I think this is a really valid point from Daphne, actually. Don't make assumptions that because we've been with you for a while that we know what we're doing. Very valid point. Thank you for sharing that. What have we got here? Matthew saying, loving the shortcuts, brilliant. Eileen saying, looks good to me. I love the idea of prompts as to go where to go next. My ADH brain needs this. Or I also have an ADH brain. So yes, that's me as well. Couple of people saying, I go straight to all record sets, for example. Rosie saying, if you've been here like me for years, you never go to the homepage at all. Whatever works for you. But I think from what I'm taking away from this new homepage is that it will be designed to work best for you. And if something else works best for you, that's cool. You could go do that. But we want to give you the best possible chance to be successful in your research, your tree building, your experience with Findmypast. And I think this is basically what this is all in aid of. So yeah.
Yeah, and I totally hear you, Rosie. And to be honest, I might have done the same with the old design a little bit, because we weren't adding much to it, we weren't updating it, it wasn't learning about you. But I would say give the new one a go, because I'd hate you to miss like where we release a new feature or something on the site. I'd hate you to miss that we'd done that. I know there's lots of other ways we communicate with our users, but we will use that page to do those things as well. So maybe give it a try before you revert back to your bookmarks.
Fantastic. Quick question from Matthew. Will we be told when we're being changed over?
Oh, that's a very good question. I don't think we've totally decided the order we will do things in, to be honest. So I can try and make sure that Ellie is up to date for these Friday sessions, maybe, just to give you a sort of heads up. But yeah, I'm not sure whether we'll do it by a subscription type yet or just randomly allocate a percentage of users. So yeah, let me think on that one, but I'll try and find a way to give you a heads up ahead of time.
Yeah, because one of the things you guys tend to do is if there's a change or a new feature coming, you don't like flip a switch and then suddenly everybody's got it. You phase it, don't you? Really, really gently to just keep an eye on like performance, and if there's any like gremlins that appear, like you can hop on those really quickly. So yeah, nice phased approach. Okay, and Robert's saying as well, I love the idea that you can tailor hints. Yeah, I'm super excited to see this appear on my own account, because like you and like many people here, we've all got older accounts, so we've got like the old design. I'm really excited to see this rolled out, and I think just the personalized aspect of it, I think, will be really, really nice. So I'm very excited.
Yeah, and we're you know, I sit in a team called, I don't know whether Ellie's explained, but we work in cross-functional teams we call them families internally, and I'm in the personalization family. We're known as the Percy Pigs. But yeah,
I'm laughing at Gordon. You're absolutely right. I do need to get in line. Sorry, Lorna, please carry on.
So we are very focused on personalization. So lots of the work we're doing in the background will start to filter through this page as well. So lots more to watch out for.
Yeah, we love the personalization family at Findmypast. They are awesome. Yes, a little bit of a behind the scenes inner working of Findmypast there. Does anybody have any questions for Lorna before we wrap up? I was hoping to do some more questions of the week, but we are rapidly running out of time. If you've got any questions, please drop them in and we'll just try. I'm just going to see if I scroll up, see if there's any that I've missed. Jenny, I think Rose has asked you to drop us a message to support, because your all record section, your my record section's gone, so we'll get that looked at. Barbara says, I'd have loved to be descended from a witch. Might explain a lot of things. I'm sure there was another witch comment I saw somewhere. Oh, here we go. Kim says, my mum went on a school trip to Pendle Hill in the 1950s. The teachers left them to explore on their own.
Wow. I don't think that would happen.
Yes, quite. Question from Rosie. As some people spend a lot of time helping on the forum, will my searches help people affect the personalization? Have I read that out correctly? As someone who spends a lot of time helping people on the forum, which you do, Rosie, you're absolutely brilliant. Will my searches to help people affect the personalization? So yeah, Rosie will use her account to help other people. Will that then affect how her homepage is personalized? Is the question.
Yeah, it shouldn't, because we'll have the context of your tree if you have a tree with us. But you know, some of our personalization does look at searches that you've most frequently performed. So if it's just a one-off, that probably wouldn't skew things too much.
Great, thank you. One more question from David. As a long-term user, can we jump onto the new homepage format now? That's a very positive question.
Oh, that's lovely. I will try and find a way where, if people especially want to be on the new homepage, that we can prioritize you in the first group.
Excellent. Okay, so watch this space for that one then, and I'll try and provide an update in next Friday's live, or maybe the week after, if we can. So if anybody does want to hop on it now ahead of time, and it's possible, I'll hopefully have instructions on how we can do that. Excellent. And I think that brings us up to the hour. Lorna, have you enjoyed your very first Friday's live?
I have very much.
Yes.
Thank you for inviting me along.
It's been lovely having you. We are going to be hopefully having more product slots. on Fridays Live. I know you guys are enjoying those, so we're hopefully arranging some more. As usual, any feedback on what Lorna has shown you today, please drop it to us via customer support or via social media, and we will ensure that is all tagged and fed back to Lorna's team. Have a fantastic weekend, enjoy the new records, and we will catch you same time, same place next week. Bye-bye.